Hi everyone, welcome to Her Hidden Heart. Thank you for being here and supporting my stories. My grandmother looked at my parents with a look I had never seen before. It was not anger, not sadness, but something cold, something final. She said 5 words that made both of them turn white. The guitar already belonged to her. Then she faced me and added words that shattered everything I believed about my family. It was not worth $71,000, sweetheart. It was worth more than $400,000. They did not only steal your inheritance. They committed a serious crime. My father opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. My mother held the kitchen counter like she might collapse, and I stood there in my grandmother's living room, realizing the people who raised me felt like strangers. But I am moving too fast. Let me begin at the start. My name is Liliana Donaldson. I am 29 years old, and I work as an archivist at a university library in Vermont. My job is to organize historical records, protect old manuscripts, and make sure important things are never lost or forgotten. The irony of that will soon become clear. It was a Tuesday when my life broke apart. Just a normal Tuesday. I was eating lunch at my desk, a turkey sandwich and an apple, while cataloging 19th century shipping records. My phone rang and I saw my mother's name on the screen. I almost ignored it. We spoke maybe once a month, usually about my sister's kids or her garden. Still, I answered, and my mother, using her proud voice, began talking about my sister Priscilla's kitchen renovation. You would not believe how beautiful it looks, she said. Viking range, shining marble, everywhere bright and new, like a perfect magazine page frozen in time forever. Countertops, custom cabinets. Your father got a great price for that old guitar. $71,000. Can you believe it? Priscilla is absolutely thrilled. I felt my sandwich turn heavy in my stomach. What guitar? I asked, even though I already knew, even though my hands were starting to shake. The one at Grandma's house, she said casually, like she was talking about an old lamp or a broken chair. Priscilla needed the kitchen finished before Thanksgiving, and you know how contractors are. Your father handled everything. My mother has a strange talent for delivering life-shattering news in the same calm tone she uses to explain a casserole recipe. It is impressive in the worst way. That guitar was not just an instrument. It was history. It was legacy. It was the only thing that ever made me feel important in my family. My grandmother, Vivian Aldridge, was a session musician in Nashville during the 1960s and 1970s. She played on records that went gold and platinum. She worked in studios with legends. One night, after a recording session that lasted until 3 in the morning, a producer handed her a guitar and told her she had earned it. A 1959 Gibson Les Paul standard with a cherry sunburst finish. Only about 300 were made that year. The kind of guitar museums want. The kind collectors would sell their homes to own. On my 18th birthday, my grandmother sat me down in her living room and told me the guitar was mine. Legally yours now, she said. I want you to have it. I was 18 and thought she meant someday, far in the future. I did not understand she meant that very day, that she had already signed the papers. The guitar stayed at her house because I lived in tiny apartments with barely enough space to breathe. Roommates who left dishes in the sink and constantly lost their keys. Felt safer there. I would visit and sometimes just sit with it, running my fingers over the case, thinking I was saving it, planning to learn to play someday. Turns out, someday came and went while I was busy organizing 18th century shipping records. Here's what you need to know about my family. I have an older sister named Priscilla. She is 34, married to a man named Gerald, and has 2 children. She is what my mother calls the successful one. Priscilla's wedding was a grand event at a country club. My parents even took out a loan to pay for it. My wedding was a backyard barbecue, which my mother described as intimate and meaningful, a polite way of saying they didn't want to spend money. Priscilla's children have college funds that my parents started the day they were born. When I applied to universities, my mother told me scholarships exist for a reason. I used to think I was the independent one, the daughter who didn't need help. Now I understand I was just the one they didn't feel like helping. After my mother finished boasting about Priscilla's kitchen, I asked one question. Did Grandma agree to this? There was a pause, just half a second. Your father handled the paperwork, she said. I'm sure everything was fine. That tiny hesitation told me everything. I told her I had to go and hung up the phone. I left my sandwich on my desk and walked out of the library without saying a word. I got in my car and drove 45 minutes to my grandmother's house, hoping along the way that this was some kind of misunderstanding. But I already knew deep in my chest that it was not. When I pulled into her driveway, I sat in the car for a full minute, just breathing. My grandmother was 78. She had trusted her son completely. And if I was right about what had happened, I was about to break her heart. I walked up to her front door and knocked. She opened it with a smile that vanished the moment she saw my face. Sweetheart, she said. What's wrong? Everything I wanted to say. Everything is wrong. But instead I asked her just one simple question. Grandma, where is your guitar? Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read everything, and your support means the world to me. My grandmother's face changed through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, then worry, then something that looked almost like fear. Richard took it 3 weeks ago, she said slowly. For appraisal, he wanted to get it properly insured. She paused, her voice dropping. He said it was for you, Liliana. He told me he was worried about it sitting here unprotected. I felt like someone punched me in the stomach. My father had used my name. He had made my grandmother believe she was helping me while he was stealing from both of us. I said nothing at first. Then I told her, Grandma, I never asked him to do anything. Her hand went to her chest. She stepped back from the doorway and sank heavily onto the couch. I followed her inside and closed the door, watching the color drain from her face. He said he had a buyer lined up, she whispered. A collector who specializes in vintage instruments. He said you would get the money. He said, you needed it for your student loans. I paid off my student loans 2 years ago. My father knew that. He had been at the dinner when I announced it, where my mother said, that's nice, and immediately switched the topic to Priscilla's children. I called my father right there, standing in my grandmother's living room. I put him on speakerphone so she could hear. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding annoyed. I was in a meeting, Lily. What is it? I need to ask you about Grandma's guitar, I said, keeping my voice steady. His tone changed instantly. Smoother, more careful. Oh, that. Mom signed an authorization. Everything was completely legitimate. The money went straight into Priscilla's account for the kitchen. Just like we discussed. I had never discussed anything with him. But that wasn't the part that made my grandmother's jaw drop. You told me the money was for Liliana, she said, loud enough for him to hear. Silence on the line. Then my father laughed. The awkward, forced laugh people use when they're caught in a lie. Mom, you must be misremembering. We talked about this. You signed the papers. I looked at my grandmother. She shook her head slowly. I never signed anything authorizing a sale, she said. Richard, I trusted you. More silence. Then my father's voice went cold. I have the document right here. Your signature is on it. I don't know what kind of game you two are playing, but I handled this properly. Talk to my lawyer if you have a problem. He hung up. My grandmother stared at the phone like it was a snake. That smooth, confident denial, that casual dismissal of her memory, that complete lack of guilt. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. I never signed anything, Liliana. I swear to you, I thought he was helping. And I believed her. My father had lied so easily, so smoothly, that I knew this was not his first time. People do not become that good at lying overnight. That evening, my sister Priscilla posted photos in our family group chat. Her new kitchen shined under professional lighting. A Viking range with 6 burners. Marble countertops with soft gray lines. Custom white cabinets with brass handles. Finally, she wrote, adding 3 heart emojis. Thank you, Mom and Dad. The comments poured in from aunts and cousins. Gorgeous. So jealous. You deserve it, sweetie. I stared at my phone until the screen went black. No one asked where the money came from. Maybe they did not know. Or maybe they did not want to know. For a moment, I almost let it go. I had spent my whole life being the reasonable one. Quiet one. The daughter who did not cause problems. The one who understood that some people get more and some people get less. And somehow, I was always in the second group. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Grandma really had signed something and forgotten. She was 78. Memory fades. I had become so good at doubting myself that I almost did it again. But the next morning, I went back to my grandmother's house. She had not slept. I could see it in her face. She had been thinking all night. I keep replaying it, she told me. Richard came on a Tuesday morning. He brought papers, but he said they were only for the appraiser. Technical descriptions. Insurance forms. She swallowed hard. He showed me where to sign. I didn't read them closely. Her voice cracked. Because he is my son. I trusted him. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Then her expression changed. Stronger. Clearer. But I never approved a sale, she said firmly. And I've started remembering other things. She then told me about the jewelry. 3 years earlier, my father had offered to take some of her pieces to be cleaned. A diamond brooch that once belonged to her mother. A vintage watch from the 1940s. A pearl necklace she wore on her wedding day. None of them ever came back. She had asked him about them twice. The first time he said the jeweler was backed up. The second time he said she must have already picked them up and forgotten. I thought I was losing my mind, she said. I even went to a doctor. I was terrified I had dementia. I cried for weeks, thinking I couldn't trust my own memory anymore. She looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. My grandmother had survived the music industry in the 1960s. She had stood her ground in rooms full of men who wanted to take credit for her work. She was not a fragile old woman. She was furious. Turns out I wasn't losing my memory, she said. I was losing my belongings. And my own son was letting me believe I was going crazy so I wouldn't ask questions. She stood up slowly, walked to the hook by the door and grabbed her car keys. Where are we going? I asked. The bank, she said. There's a safe deposit box with your name on it. I should have shown you years ago, but I kept hoping I was wrong about him. She opened the front door, then looked back at me. I wasn't wrong. The bank was a small brick building in the center of town. My grandmother had been a customer there for more than 40 years. The manager greeted her by name and led us straight to the vault. The safe deposit box was in both our names. I didn't even know I was listed on it. Grandma pulled out a thick manila folder and handed it to me. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. Open it, she said. The first document changed everything. It was a notarized gift deed dated August 15, 2014. My 18th birthday. In clear legal language, it transferred full ownership of the 1959 Gibson Les Paul Standard, serial number 94721, from Vivian Aldridge to Liliana Donaldson. There were witness signatures. There was a notary stamp. It was completely, unquestionably legitimate. I told you it was yours, my grandmother said quietly. I meant legally yours. That day. I stared at the document in my hands. I thought you meant eventually. I thought you meant when I was older. I know. She nodded slowly. I should have explained it better. I should have given you a copy. But I hoped it would never matter. I hoped I was wrong about your father. She took a deep breath. I started seeing problems years ago. Small things. Money I lent him that disappeared. Family items that went missing. Little lies that never added up. He is my son. I love him. But I haven't trusted him in a very long time. She had done this secretly, using her own attorney, not the family lawyer. She kept the document in a safe deposit box my father couldn't access. She never told anyone. She had been protecting me for 11 years. Protecting the guitar, waiting for exactly this kind of betrayal. Your grandmother was basically running a counterintelligence operation from her kitchen table. I had clearly underestimated her. There was a second document in the folder. A professional appraisal from 2018. A specialist in vintage instruments had examined the guitar, confirmed its authenticity, and assessed its value. $385,000. I read the number 3 times. Then I read it again. That was 7 years ago, my grandmother said. Prices have gone up since then. I checked recent sales last year. Guitars like yours are selling for over $400,000 now. My father had sold it for $71,000. Either he was shockingly ignorant about what he had stolen, or the buyer had taken advantage of his desperation. Probably both. When we got back to my apartment, I started researching. The buyer was a dealer in Boston called Morrison Fine Instruments. Their website was sleek and professional. They specialized in rare vintage guitars, and their tagline made my stomach turn. We find value others miss. I searched their current inventory, and there it was. My guitar. My grandmother's guitar, posted with professional photographs and a detailed history. $449,000. They knew exactly what they had bought for $71,000. They planned to make nearly $400,000 in profit. But that wasn't the worst part. Kept digging. I remembered something my father had mentioned at Thanksgiving last year. He had been getting some old items appraised. I hadn't paid attention at the time. Why would I? My father was always talking about schemes and deals that never went anywhere. 2 weeks later, I was at my parents' house for my nephew's birthday party. While everyone was in the backyard watching the kids, I slipped into the kitchen and opened the junk drawer. Every family has one. A drawer full of batteries, rubber bands, old takeout menus, and business cards. Morrison Fine Instruments. Theodore Morrison, proprietor. On the back, handwritten in blue ink. Asterisk Richard, call me about the Gibson anytime. Ted. Asterisk this was not a random sale. My father had planned this. The dealer had been waiting. I took a photo of the card and put it back exactly where I found it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and did what I do best. Built a timeline. I organized the evidence. I documented everything. My father had known about the dealer for at least a year. He took the guitar from my grandmother under false pretenses, claiming it was for appraisal and insurance. He forged her signature on an authorization to sell. And he sold property that had legally belonged to me for 11 years. This was not a family disagreement. This was not a misunderstanding. This was theft. This was forgery. This was fraud. I called my grandmother and told her what I had found. There was a long silence on the phone. I could hear her breathing, thinking, deciding. When your grandfather was dying, she finally said. He made me promise to take care of Richard. He worried our son was weak, easily tempted. I've spent 40 years keeping that promise. Making excuses, cleaning up messes, telling myself it wasn't as bad as it looked. Her voice grew firm. But he stole from you. My granddaughter. He used my name and made me think I was losing my mind. I'm done protecting him. She gave me a phone number. Caroline Webb, she said. She's an attorney in Burlington. She specializes in fraud and estate disputes. She's expensive, but she wins. Grandma, I can't afford that, I said. I can, she replied. This is exactly what I saved my money for. Protecting my family. My real family. My grandmother had the kind of savings that only comes from living through the 1970s without expensive habits. All those years of saying no to rockstar parties had finally paid off. The next morning I called Caroline Webb and made an appointment. The guitar was legally mine. The evidence was clear. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be reasonable. I was going to get justice. Caroline Webb's office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building. Weeks doing exactly what I do best. Gathering documents and building a case. My training as an archivist had prepared me for this moment, even though I never knew it would. I got a copy of the forged authorization letter. My father, in his arrogance, had kept a copy in his filing cabinet at home. He was proud of his paperwork. He even showed it to my mother, who mentioned it to my grandmother, who asked to see it. He handed it over without hesitation, never imagining she would photograph it and send it to me. Caroline brought in a forensic document examiner, a specialist who analyzes handwriting for court cases. He compared my grandmother's real signature from her driver's license and bank records to the signature on the authorization letter. Once you knew what to look for, the differences were clear: pressure patterns, letter shapes, the way certain loops connected. The expert's conclusion was final. The signature was not written by Vivian Aldridge. We also obtained my grandmother's phone records. They showed calls from my father in the days before he took the guitar. Short calls, the kind you make to confirm details and make sure someone will be home. Then there was the business card, the handwritten note from Theodore Morrison. "Richard, call me about the Gibson anytime." Proof this was not impulsive. Proof my father had been planning this for at least a year. But the investigation uncovered something else. Something even worse. Remember the jewelry my grandmother believed she had lost? The diamond brooch. The vintage watch. The pearl necklace. Caroline's investigator found records of similar items sold to an antique dealer in New Hampshire 3 years earlier. The seller's name was Richard Donaldson. $35,000 gone. And my grandmother had spent months believing she was developing dementia. When I told her, she didn't cry. She sat very still for a long time. "He let me think I was losing my mind," she finally said. His own mother. So I wouldn't ask questions. That was the moment I knew there would be no reconciliation. No family therapy. No return to normal. My father hadn't just stolen from us. He had deliberately tortured his own mother to hide what he'd done. I had $17,000 in my savings account. Not a fortune, but not nothing. Years of packing lunches, skipping vacations, and saying no to things I wanted. Meanwhile, my sister's brand new kitchen had cost $68,000 of stolen money. I had spent my whole life being responsible, and my parents had spent 30 seconds deciding I didn't deserve what was mine. Caroline prepared 3 demand letters. The first went to Morrison Fine Instruments. Return the guitar immediately or face litigation for receiving stolen property. We know the seller did not have legal authority. We have documentation. Cooperate or be named in a lawsuit that will become public record. The second went to my father. $350,000 in damages, representing the difference between the sale price and the guitar's true value. Respond within 10 days or face civil and criminal proceedings. The third went to both my parents together. Notice that all evidence has been compiled and will be submitted to law enforcement if no settlement is reached. No phone calls. No family meetings. No emotional confrontations. Just paper. Just law. Just consequences. I watched the FedEx tracking like it was the most important document I had ever handled. I work with history. I've held letters from the Revolutionary War. I've processed Civil War correspondence and 19th century love. Letters. None of them had ever made my hands shake like watching that delivery confirmation appear on my screen. Delivered. Signed for all 3. Then I waited for 2 days. My phone stayed silent. I went to work, ate lunch at my desk, cataloged manuscripts, answered emails, pretended everything was normal. On day 3, my phone started ringing, and it didn't stop. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, take a second to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support helps me keep making these stories, and it truly means everything. Now let's see what happened next. The dealer folded first. 2 days after receiving Caroline's letter, Morrison Fine Instruments responded through their attorney. They would return the guitar immediately. No litigation necessary. They would also provide full documentation of the sale, including all communications with my father. They did not want publicity. A vintage instrument dealer's reputation is everything. Word that they had purchased stolen property, even unknowingly, would destroy them in the collector community. Caroline called me with the news. "They folded faster than a lawn chair in a hurricane," she said. "And they're giving us everything." Everything turned out to be very useful. The communications between my father and Theodore Morrison painted a clear picture. My father had reached out first, not the dealer. He referenced the business card from a year earlier, described the guitar, and said it was a family piece we needed to sell quickly. Morrison asked one question. "Does your mother know?" My father's response. "She authorized it. Paperwork is done." The dealer offered $55,000. My father countered at $75,000. They settled at $71,000. The entire negotiation took 4 days. My father accepted a price that was less than 20% of the guitar's value because he wanted fast cash. Priscilla's contractor needed payment before starting the kitchen renovation. $68,000 for the kitchen, $3,000 that my father kept as what he probably called a handling fee. My grandmother's legacy had been sold for a Viking range and some pocket money. On day 4, my father called me. First time we had spoken since that afternoon in my grandmother's living room. His voice started controlled, almost professional. "Liliana, this is family business. You're bringing lawyers into family business. This is not how we handle things." Kept my voice steady. "You stole my property," I said. "That makes it legal business." He tried anger. "After everything we've done for you, after all the sacrifices your mother and I made." I asked him a simple question. "What exactly have you done for me?" Silence. Then he tried bargaining. "We can work this out. Pay you back over time. Just call off the lawyers and we can settle this like a family." "With what money? You don't have $400,000. More silence. Then he tried guilt, the weapon that had always worked before. "Your grandmother is 78, he said. "Her heart cannot take this kind of stress. Is that what you want, to put your grandmother in the hospital?" "Grandma is the one who hired the attorney," I said. The longest silence yet. Then he hung up without another word. Caroline filed the police report the next day. All the evidence, the forged signature, expert analysis, communications with the dealer, the pattern of theft going back years, was included. A detective was assigned to the case. She requested an interview with my father. Not an arrest, not yet. Just an interview. My father hired an attorney. Not a good one. He could not afford good. The attorney's advice was to cooperate, answer questions, and look remorseful. During the interview, my father tried to minimize everything. "Family misunderstanding," he said. "My mother is elderly. She gets confused. My daughter is emotional." The detective was not impressed. "Family misunderstandings do not involve forged signatures," she said. That was when my father realized this was not going away. This was not something he could talk his way out of. This was not a situation where charm or confidence would save him. 3 days later, my mother called. She was crying. She always cried when she wanted something. "How could you do this to your father?" she said. "How could you tear this family apart?" I asked the obvious question. How could he do this to me? She had an answer ready. It was for Priscilla. She needed that kitchen. She has children, Liliana. She has a family to take care of. "And what do you have?" She didn't answer at first. Then finally, "You were always so independent, so self-sufficient. We didn't think you would mind." And there it was. The truth, exposed without her even realizing what she had admitted. They didn't think I would mind being robbed. They didn't think I would notice. They didn't think I mattered enough to consider. "I minded," I said, and then I hung up. The last call came from my sister. Priscilla's voice sounded different than I expected. Not angry. Not defensive. Chicken. "Liliana, I need you to know something. Mom and Dad told me Grandma agreed to sell the guitar. They said she wanted to help with the kitchen. They said it was her idea." "I know," I said. "I never would have accepted the money if I had known." She trailed off. "Are you going to sue me?" Her voice cracked. "Am I part of this?" "You received the money," I said. "You benefited from the theft. I did not know it was stolen. That is for the lawyers to sort out." Long silence. "This is going to destroy Mom and Dad," she said. They destroyed themselves, I told her. I'm just the one who finally noticed. 6 weeks after I sent the letters, the guitar came home. A bonded courier delivered it to my apartment. Same case. Same instrument. Undamaged. I opened the case and stared at it for a long time. Cherry sunburst finish, worn in all the right places. Over 50 years of music history in lacquered wood and steel strings. It looked different now, not because the guitar had changed but because I had. It was never about the money, but it was never just about the guitar either. It was about being seen, being valued, being believed. I closed the case and called my grandmother. "It's home," I said. She started to cry, but this time I knew they were the right kind of tears. The legal process took 4 months from start to finish. My father's attorney reviewed the evidence and gave him advice he did not want to hear. A trial meant public record, media attention, and a guaranteed conviction. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged signature, the documented communications, the pattern of previous thefts. A plea deal offered some control, reduced charges, and potentially a shorter sentence. My father chose the plea deal, not because he was sorry, but because he was calculating even then. He stood before a judge in a Vermont courthouse and pleaded guilty to 2 felony charges. Grand larceny for theft of property valued over $100,000, and forgery for the falsified authorization. The judge was not sympathetic. "This was not a moment of weakness," she said. "This was a calculated theft from your own daughter, facilitated by manipulating your elderly mother. The court finds no mitigating circumstances." Richard Donaldson, 2.5 years in prison, 5 years of probation after release, felony record permanent. He would lose the right to vote. He could not own firearms. Most professional jobs would be closed to him forever. He did not look at me when the sentence was read. He did not look at anyone. My mother pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. Accessory after the fact, reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor. She had known about the sale, helped cover it up, and repeated my father's lies when my grandmother asked questions. Her sentence: 3 years probation and 200 hours of community service. No prison time, but she was jointly liable for financial restitution. The court ordered them to pay $350,000, the difference between what they sold my guitar for and its true value. They did not have $350,000. Nobody thought they did. But they had assets. Their retirement accounts. $165,000 seized from a 401k they had been building for 30 years. Their home equity. The house they had lived in for 25 years, now mortgaged to its maximum value. $180,000. Total recovered: $345,000. The remaining $5,000 would come from garnished wages. My mother, at 57, would spend the rest of her working life paying off what they stole from me. Their retirement plans gone. Their financial security gone. Their golden years of travel and relaxation replaced with a small apartment and a job my mother had to take at a medical office reception desk. I did not feel happy about it, but I did not feel guilty either. The dealer faced his own consequences. Theodore Morrison could not be criminally charged. He claimed he had no way of knowing the guitar was stolen, and proving otherwise would have been difficult. But civil liability was another matter. He settled out of court, returning the $71,000 purchase price plus $15,000 in damages. His legal fees probably doubled that. Worse than the money was the reputation. Word spread quickly in the vintage instrument community. Morrison Fine Instruments had bought a stolen Gibson Les Paul from a seller who clearly did not have proper title. They had paid less than 20% of its value. They had asked minimal questions. Other collectors started talking. Other sellers came forward with complaints. Within a year, Morrison Fine Instruments closed permanently. 30 years Theodore Morrison had spent building that business. Gone because he got greedy with the wrong guitar. My sister Priscilla was not legally liable. She genuinely did not know about the forgery. The court accepted that she believed our parents when they said Grandma had approved the sale. But $68,000 of stolen money had paid for her kitchen. Morally, she owed it. Legally, she could not be forced to pay. She paid anyway, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. With our parents' assets seized and my father heading to prison, there was no more family money. No more safety net. Gerald, her husband, looked at the situation clearly for the first time. His in-laws were criminals. His wife's family was publicly disgraced. The comfortable life he had married into was gone. He filed for divorce 6 months later. No affair. No dramatic confrontation. He just decided the cost of staying was higher than the cost of leaving. Some people marry for love. Some marry for money. Gerald married for the idea that things would always be easy. When they stopped being easy, so did he. Priscilla sold the Viking range, sold the marble countertops, sold the "here's a clean, Titan continuation that keeps the tone and cadence consistent, smooths the flow, and gives the ending a quiet but powerful landing." I didn't change the substance, just clarity, rhythm, and emotional weight. Custom cabinets, and got $28,000 for all of it. Used kitchen equipment does not hold its value. She took a job at a department store. The first job she had worked since before her wedding 12 years earlier. She lives in that same house now, with laminate countertops, basic appliances, and no husband to complain about them. We do not talk much, but we do not hate each other either. My grandmother changed her will. She did not announce it. She did not make a scene. She simply met with her attorney and filed the paperwork. Richard Donaldson, her only son, would receive exactly $1. Enough to prevent him from contesting, not enough to matter. Priscilla Hoffman would receive family photographs and personal letters. Things with sentimental value. Things that could not be sold. Liliana Donaldson would receive everything else. The house. The savings. Whatever remained. I told her she did not have to do that. She looked at me with those sharp eyes that had seen so much. "I spent 40 years protecting a man who did not protect anyone but himself," she said. "That is finished now. You are my family. You always were." 6 months after the trial, I visited her with the guitar. I had been taking lessons. I was still not good. My fingers fumbled on the frets, my rhythm wandered, and I could only play 3 songs all the way through without mistakes. But I played one of them for her. The first song she ever taught me, sitting in her living room when I was 8 years old. I had not remembered it until I started learning again, but my hands remembered. She listened with her eyes closed. When I finished, the room was quiet. Late afternoon light filled the space. The guitar was warm against my chest. "I knew you would take care of it," she said. "That is why it was always yours." He nodded. Could not speak. We sat there together, the music still hanging in the air, and for the first time in years, everything felt exactly where it belonged. Sat together for a long time after that, not talking, not needing to. The guitar was worth $400,000. But that was never really the point. It was worth being believed. It was worth being chosen. It was worth knowing that someone saw me clearly and decided I mattered. The people who truly love you never ask you to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. I promise you will love it. See you in the next story.